So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be creating our pagination information. And what we're going to have is information about what's being paged. And what we're going to return to our client is the pagination information inside the header. And what I mean by that, if I go to Postman and let's take a look at our requests we have inside here, we've got one to log in as Lisa. I've been logged in as Bob in Postman, so let's get Lisa's token back and saved into the environment. And then if we just go and get the users, just as we are doing now, then what we'll do is go and get all of the different users. And if we take a look at our headers, then this tells us our responses coming back from the server. What we're going to do here is add an additional header that contains the pagination information that we can then get that information out of the header in the client and then use that to display the pagination information in the browser. That's our goal here, is to get this information in the header. So what we're going to do is create a helper class to send that information back, and we'll create a new class and we'll call it pagination header and press return. And this is going to contain similar properties to what we had inside our paged list class, but we can't reuse that. We need to do this in a separate class. So what we'll do is we'll just add the 4 properties: the int to the current page, the items per page, and we'll add an int for the total items, and we'll add an int for the total pages. And this is all the information we want to send back to the client. And we'll just add a constructor in here to make it easier to use, and we'll generate the constructor, and we can leave this just as it is. So when we create a new instance of a pagination header, we're just going to need to pass in the current page, the items per page, the total items, and the total pages. So what we'll also do is we'll add an extension method so that we can add a pagination header to a HTTP response. So what we'll do is we'll just add, inside our extensions folder, we'll add another new C# class, and we'll call this one HTTP extensions, and press return. And what we're going to do inside here, because it's an extension method, we give it its static property, and then we create the static method inside here. So this is going to be a public static, and we're not going to return anything from this because we're just going to be adding our pagination headers onto a response. And we'll call it add pagination header. And we're going to be working with the HTTP response. So this is the class we're going to be extending. So we'll say this HTTP response, and we'll bring in Microsoft ASPNET Core HTTP. And we'll call this response. And what we're going to pass to this is the int of the current page, the int of the items per page, and then we want an int for the total items and an int for the total pages. And inside here, let's just move some of this stuff down as well. And inside here, what we're going to do is create a pagination header. So we're going to say var pagination header equals, and we're going to say new pagination header. And we'll need to get this from our helpers class or our helpers folder. And we'll say current page and items per page and total items and total pages. Now remember what I said about things going in parentheses for parameters, and what this means is that we need to get this in exactly the correct order. So if we take a look at our pagination header, then we need to specify this exactly as it specifies on here. Otherwise we'll get mixed up results, and what we'll do then is we want to add our pagination to our response headers. So we'll say response.headers, and then we'll say add, and we're going to add the name of the header called pagination. Now once upon a time, for custom headers, which is what this is, you would specify x-pagination. But there's no requirement to do that anymore. The only requirement is that you give your header a sensible name. So we don't need to specify x-pagination. And what we need to do is serialize this, because our response headers, when we add this, it takes a key and a string value. So what we can do is serialize this as JSON, and we'll say JSON serializer, and we'll need to bring this in from system.text.json. There are two versions of this, so please select the system.text.json, and we'll say serialize, and then we'll pass in our pagination header. And then what we need to do, because we're adding a custom header, we need to add a cores header onto this to make this header available. So what we'll do is we'll say response.headers.add to add another header, and we'll say access-control-expose-headers, and then we specify the name of the header that we're exposing, and the name is pagination. Now, this can't be anything you want it to be. This has to be spelt exactly as it's spelt here. Same goes for pagination. This needs to match the name of the header that you're returning from this. I've probably seen about 50 questions in the Q&A saying, I can't get hold of my pagination, but 9 times out of 10, it's because this has been spelt incorrectly. So forewarning is forearmed in this case. And then what we'll do is we need to create a class so that we can receive the pagination parameters from the user. Because in our user controller, what we currently have when we go and get our users, and let's scroll up to where we're actually doing this, we're not taking anything in a request at the moment. But what we're going to do is take all of these parameters as a query string, and we're going to store that in an object. So what we'll do is go across to our helpers class once, or our helpers folder once again, and we'll create a new class and we'll call it user params, and press return. Now what we need to do in here is we're going to set a maximum page size. What's the most amount of things that we're ever going to return from a request? And we should always set this. So what we're going to do is say we're going to have a private const of int, and we're going to call it max page size, and we're going to set this equal to 50. And then what we'll do, we'll add a property for the int of the page number. We're going to take this from the user, and we'll give it a default value of 1. And then what we're going to have is a private int, and we're going to set the page size equal to 10. And this is going to be our default page size. So what we need to do is give ourselves another property inside here, but we're going to set it to 10 by default, but we're also going to compare against the maximum page size, so that if the client chooses a different value from 10, then we want to compare against this, and if it's over this, then we're going to set it to 50. So what we'll do is we'll add a full property here. We'll say public int page size, and inside here what we'll do is we'll say get and use an arrow, and we're going to get the current page size, or what we have inside page size. And when we set this property, what we're going to do is take our page size, and we're going to get its value, and if it's greater than the max page size, then what we'll do is we'll set it to the max page size, and if it's not, then we're going to set it to the value that the user or the client has supplied. So whatever happens, it's going to be a maximum of 50. So these are our helper classes, and what we'll take a look at next is how we can actually use this.